Welcome. If you're someone who spends a lot of time alone, whether by choice, by circumstance, or by the natural seasons of life, this video is for you. Today we're going to explore something many of us feel, but rarely talk about deeply: the difference between loneliness and solitude. And more importantly, the quiet power that can grow when we begin to feel at home with ourselves. There's a moment in life, often quiet, often unnoticed, when the world around you grows still. It's not because anything dramatic has happened. The sun still rises, the kettle still whistles, the floor still creaks beneath your feet. But something has changed. The laughter that used to echo in the hallway has faded. The phone rings less. The calendar isn't full like it once was. There's no sudden emptiness, just a slow, unfolding silence, like fog moving in after a long summer. And for many, this moment comes not with a bang, but with a whisper. You realize you're alone, not just alone in the room, alone in the shape of your days, alone in the way your memories live inside you now, quietly, like unopened letters. You may live by yourself, or your partner may have passed, your children may have moved away. Friends who used to stop by now send quick texts. The rhythm of life has changed, softened, slowed. And in this quiet, a question begins to rise, sometimes gently, sometimes like a weight on the chest. Am I lonely, or am I simply alone? It's a question more and more people find themselves facing, especially later in life. It's also a question that rarely gets answered honestly because we're taught to avoid it. We're told to stay busy, to keep moving, to distract ourselves with noise. But what happens when the noise stops? What happens when you finally have time and no one to spend it with? This is not a question of despair. It's a question of presence, of noticing, of beginning again, not in the world out there, but in the world within. It's the question this entire reflection is built on. What if being alone doesn't have to mean being lonely? Let's sit with that together. Maybe you're watching this with your morning coffee, or maybe it's late at night and the house is quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Maybe this isn't your first time feeling this way. Maybe it's been years, or maybe this silence is new and you're still trying to make sense of it. Wherever you are in that, know this: you are not broken. This is not a failing. Solitude is not a punishment. It can be, if we let it, a return. Loneliness and solitude are often confused, but they are not the same. Loneliness is a hunger. Solitude is a homecoming. Loneliness says, I am missing something. Solitude says, I am finding something. Loneliness is about absence. Solitude is about presence. And the beauty is, sometimes we only discover the second after we've endured the first. There's nothing wrong with missing people. There's nothing wrong with aching for companionship. That longing is human. You've loved. You've lost. You've lived through seasons where the house was full, the phone rang, the calendar overflowed, and now things are different. That ache you feel isn't weakness. It's evidence of how deeply you've cared. But solitude offers something else. It offers the chance to be with yourself, not in self-pity, not in boredom, but in quiet companionship. It's the space to hear your own voice again, to remember who you are outside of roles and responsibilities. It's a place where your soul can breathe. Zen philosophy teaches that within silence lies clarity, that by sitting with the moment without resisting it, we begin to see what's truly there. Not the stories we tell ourselves, not the fears that rise when we're alone, but the simple, unadorned truth of the present: a teacup, a patch of light on the floor, the rhythm of your breath, and in that stillness, something remarkable can happen. We begin to feel full. Not because anything was added, but because we've stopped chasing what isn't here. Solitude is the absence of distraction, and in that absence we begin to feel whole. The Stoics, thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, they knew solitude well. They lived in bustling cities, faced political unrest, held positions of power, and yet they returned again and again to the idea of inner stillness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That wasn't poetry to him, it was survival. In a world he couldn't control, he chose to cultivate peace within. And so can you. But let's not pretend this is easy. For many, the shift from loneliness to solitude feels impossible. You sit down to enjoy the quiet, and the mind races. Memories come up, regrets, longing, restlessness. You reach for your phone. You turn on the TV. Anything to avoid the quiet. But what if the quiet isn't what hurts? What if the pain comes from resisting it? What if, instead of running from the silence, you turn toward it? You don't have to do it all at once. Start small. Turn off the background noise for 5 minutes. Sit in your favorite chair. Notice how the light moves in the room. Listen to the sounds of the world outside your window. The rustle of leaves, the hum of distant traffic, the creak of the house settling into itself. This is not emptiness. This is life, unfiltered. And slowly, gently, something begins to change. You begin to realize you don't need constant interaction to feel connected. You don't need to be surrounded to feel full. The presence you've been craving might have been your own all along. This is the beginning of solitude. And solitude is not just a concept, it's a practice. Like tending a garden, it asks for time, attention, patience. Some days will feel vibrant, peaceful, joyful even. Other days the silence will sting. That's normal. That's real. The point isn't to escape the ache. The point is to sit beside it, to hold it like a friend, to say, "I see you, I'm still here, you are still here." And that is everything. There's a kind of healing that happens, not in noise, but in noticing. You might feel it while folding laundry slowly, your hands tracing fabric worn by years. Or when you sit with a photo, creased at the corners, and find yourself smiling at a moment frozen in time. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, but something inside shifts. A breath deepens, a memory softens, a moment becomes sacred. That's solitude working quietly, the way wind works through tall grass, unseen but unmistakable. There's a strength that comes from learning to sit with yourself, not just tolerate your own company, but begin to enjoy it, begin to trust it, begin to recognize that being alone does not mean being forgotten. It does not mean being unloved. It means you are building a relationship with your own soul. And maybe for the first time in a long while, you're realizing you deserve that. You deserve your own kindness, your own attention, your own peace. The world doesn't always reflect that back to us, especially as we get older, especially when we're no longer in the rooms where decisions are made, where youth is worshipped, where speed is everything. But here in the quiet, you begin to remember something deeper, that your worth was never based on how many people needed you. It was never about how full your calendar was, or how many voices called your name. It was in the way you stayed, the way you loved, the way you kept going, even when the world moved on. And now in this quieter chapter, there is something waiting for you, not behind you, not lost in the past, but right here. Stillness, clarity, presence. These are not lesser things. They are essential things, and they are often only found in solitude. So how do we cultivate it? Not through force, not through some rigid schedule, but through gentle practice. Maybe it begins in the morning. Before the rush of the day, you sit for just a few minutes. You place your hands on your lap. You breathe. You notice how the air feels. You listen, not for anything in particular, but simply to listen. Or maybe it's in the evening, when the house grows quiet and shadows stretch long across the floor. You light a small lamp. You open a book. You read not to escape, but to return. To remember that you're allowed to take in beauty, even when no one else is there to see it with you. These small rituals are not frivolous. They are threads that stitch meaning into our days. And meaning is what keeps loneliness from becoming despair. Because loneliness, left unattended, turns inward. It becomes shame. It says there must be something wrong with me. But solitude, when tended with care, becomes sanctuary. It says, I am whole, even here, even now. And when you begin to trust that truth, something inside you softens. You stop needing to fill the silence. You stop seeing time alone as wasted. You stop measuring your day by how many people you interacted with. You begin to measure it by presence, by grace, by how gently you move through the hours. And that, my friend, is a life worth living. So if today feels quiet, let it be. If you feel a little ache, don't push it away. Hold it, breathe with it, and remember, you are not the only one walking this path. All around the world, in small apartments and quiet houses, people are sitting just like you are, wondering, remembering, trying, healing. You are part of something larger, even when it doesn't feel like it. And if you ever doubt that, return here. Listen again. Let these words hold you. Let them remind you you are still here. You are still becoming. And that is enough. There's a kind of dignity in moving through life without needing to announce yourself. In walking into a room and not needing to impress anyone. In waking up and living the day slowly, intentionally, without the frantic need to prove something. That's what solitude teaches when we stop resisting it. It brings us back to the root of who we are when there is nothing left to perform. In the modern world, so much of what we do is shaped by external validation. Social media, messages, feedback, praise, response. But solitude removes the audience. It asks, who are you when no one is watching? What matters to you when no one else is clapping? That's not an easy question, and sometimes the answers are painful. You might realize you've lived decades giving yourself to others, children, partners, parents, colleagues. You gave them your time, your energy, your care, and now with that space returned to you, you're not quite sure how to be with yourself. But here's the truth. The care you gave others, you are allowed to give that back to yourself now. Not as an afterthought, not as a consolation, but as a recognition that your own inner life matters. There's a kind of life that begins when the noise ends. The kind of life where making tea becomes a meditation, where sitting by the window becomes communion, where writing down a memory is no longer just nostalgia, it's honoring, where breathing quietly in your own home is not a sign of isolation, but of safety. This is not about escaping life. It's about seeing it clearly, finally, without the distractions. The Stoics used to ask themselves daily, what is within my control? And often the answer was simple. My breath, my thoughts, my actions. Everything else was wind. Everything else was weather, passing, changing, unstable. You too can ask that question. And when you do, solitude stops feeling like a cage. It becomes a clearing, a place where you can breathe again. And the truth is, you don't need a perfect environment to begin. You don't need a mountaintop or a retreat. Solitude meets you right where you are. Even if the dishes are undone, even if the house is a little too quiet, even if you're tired and unsure, you just have to show up. As you are, that's enough. And if part of showing up means creating a little ritual, a lamp you turn on every night, a spot you sit in every morning, a scent that makes you feel safe, then do it. These aren't luxuries. These are lifelines, acts of tenderness toward yourself. I've left a few things below this video, simple items that have helped me shape that quiet space. A small lamp with a warm glow, a journal that invites reflection, and a light I wear when I sit by myself to read. Different styles, different prices, because solitude is not one size fits all. You choose what supports you, not because you need more stuff, but because some things gently remind us, I deserve to feel peace in my own presence. And you do. You've earned that. You don't have to apologize for the shape your life has taken. You don't have to rush to fill the silence. You don't have to feel guilty for enjoying your own company. You're allowed to love the quiet. You're allowed to belong to yourself again. And if you don't know how yet, that's okay. Start with this moment, this breath, this gentle unfolding of time. Because even if you can't see it, even if you don't always feel it, you are not disappearing. You are becoming. There's no timetable for healing, no perfect path to inner peace. But there is a kind of wisdom that grows in the stillness, slow, steady, deep. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives like sunrise, gradual, quiet, inevitable. You don't even notice it at first. One day you sit down and the silence doesn't hurt quite as much. One morning the ache is still there, but it doesn't define the whole day. Something shifts, not loudly, not even clearly, but undeniably. The space inside you begins to hold you rather than swallow you. This is not the kind of change that others see. No one walks in and says, "You've healed," but you feel it in how you breathe, in how you respond to the small inconveniences, in how you greet yourself in the mirror, less critically, more curiously. Not with pride necessarily, but with a kind of recognition. I'm still here. I'm still becoming. There's no trophy for that, no applause. But there is a quiet kind of dignity in it. Most people think growth is visible, that it's tied to doing more, achieving more, becoming something noticeably new. But real growth, especially in solitude, often looks like subtraction. You don't gather more answers. You release the need for them. You don't suddenly become fearless. You just stop being so surprised by fear. You don't stop missing people. You simply stop expecting the missing to go away. And that acceptance, soft, almost imperceptible, is the beginning of freedom. You start to see time differently, not as something to fill, but as something to feel. You start to see yourself differently, not as a person left behind, but as a person returned to. Return from the noise, return from the performing, return from the endless trying, return to this, breath, space, quiet, enough. And that word, enough, begins to change its meaning. It's no longer a consolation prize. It becomes a kind of truth, a root. You are not unfinished because you are quiet. You are not failing because you live alone. You are not behind because your joy arrives in smaller moments than it used to. Your life doesn't need to be loud to be sacred, and maybe the world will never understand that. But solitude does. Solitude holds space for it. Solitude whispers, you don't have to become more. You just have to return. And in that return, you might cry, not out of grief, but out of relief. Because it's been so long since you sat with yourself and didn't demand change. So long since you breathed without bargaining. So long since you were just allowed to be. But now you are. And that is how healing often begins. Not with a plan, not with a fix, but with the softest decision you've ever made. I will not run from myself today. Can I ask you something? When was the last time you sat down and gave yourself full permission to do nothing? Not as a break between tasks, but as a whole point. Not to recharge, not to recover, just to be. It feels strange, doesn't it? We're not used to that. Most of us were taught that worth comes from usefulness. That time should be filled. That stillness is laziness. But what if that was never true? What if you sitting alone in a quiet room is not wasted time, but sacred time? What if the day you spend without a single plan is not an empty day, but a full one? What if you are not behind, you are deepening? Sometimes I imagine speaking directly to someone who's watching this late at night. Maybe you. The house is dark. The only sound is the low hum of the fridge or the heater clicking on. You're sitting in your chair, the same chair you always sit in, and something about tonight feels a little heavier than usual. I'm not there, but I wish I could be. I'd say, it's okay. You're not strange for feeling this way. You're not weak for wishing someone else were here. That doesn't cancel out your strength. It just means you're human. And then maybe I'd ask, can we just sit for a while? No fixing, no figuring it all out. Just sit. You don't have to earn that moment. You don't have to perform to be worthy of rest. You don't have to be okay to be allowed peace. Sometimes the deepest transformation begins right there, in the moment you stop asking yourself to change, when you let silence rise and fall around you like breath. When you stop measuring your progress by how productive you are and start noticing, I'm here, I'm breathing, I'm listening to something that's not the world. Maybe you don't even realize it, but that part of you that still hungers to be witnessed is being witnessed now. By you, and that kind of witnessing, that quiet inner seeing, is one of the most healing things in the world. So if you've been carrying something silently, if you've been waiting for someone to ask how you're really doing, if you've gone through an entire day without hearing your name spoken aloud, let this moment say what words can't. You're not invisible. You're not alone in the silence. You are allowed to feel this all. You are allowed to rest. And yes, you are still allowed to laugh, even alone. You're still allowed to enjoy your food, even if no one made it for you. You're still allowed to speak aloud to no one at all. That's not odd. That's intimacy with yourself. And that, though it takes time to grow, may turn out to be the most trustworthy companionship you've ever known. Some memories arrive uninvited. You might be folding clothes and suddenly hear a voice that hasn't spoken to you in years. Or you see a certain shade of sky, and it reminds you of a day you thought you had forgotten. There's no logic to it, no schedule. Memory doesn't ask for permission. It just returns, like breath, like tide. And when you're alone, those moments feel louder, not because the past is any closer, but because there's less between you and it now. No busyness to drown it out, no conversations to run to, just you, the air around you, and what rises from within. Some days that feels heavy. Some days it feels like home. Let me ask you something, gently. Have you ever found yourself smiling at a memory that used to make you cry? Or sitting still, letting a name pass through your mind, and instead of breaking, you breathe? That's not forgetting. That's not moving on. That's growing around what once consumed you. That's healing in the shape of a quiet evening. And you don't need anyone else to witness that for it to be real. It's real because you felt it. And if no one else tells you this, I'm proud of you for that. I'm proud of the way you've kept going. I'm proud of the mornings you got up, even when no one would have blamed you for staying in bed. I'm proud of the way you carry your history, not with bitterness, but with grace. And I hope you are too, because there's a certain kind of strength that comes only after the world stops clapping for you. When the only applause is the sound of your own breath rising and falling, quietly, faithfully. Time hasn't left you behind. It has simply slowed enough for you to catch up to yourself. And maybe that's what this season is for. Not for running, not for striving, but for noticing. For remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. For returning to the small, ordinary joys that are easy to miss when life is loud. The sound of boiling water, the feel of your favorite mug in your hand, the way light rests on a wooden table in the afternoon, the rhythm of your own voice humming softly in the kitchen. None of that is trivial. None of it is lost on the soul. In fact, your soul may have been waiting for these moments all along. So if you're wondering where meaning is now, it's here, not in the headlines, not in the rush, but in the space between breaths, in the soft moments where nothing important is happening, except you, still here, still present, still becoming. It's okay if today moves slowly. It's okay if you didn't accomplish anything anyone would applaud. It's okay if your biggest victory was washing the dishes or walking the mailbox or just getting through the afternoon without falling apart. You don't need to apologize for living a quiet life. You don't need to defend your pace. The world may value urgency, speed, results, but your soul moves by another rhythm, a slower one, a wiser one, a kinder one. And when you begin to honor that rhythm, even in small ways, life begins to feel less like a race and more like a walk home, a walk with pauses, a walk with noticing, a walk where beauty reveals itself not in grand gestures, but in soft arrivals. I wonder, what if you gave yourself permission to live as if no one was judging? What if your afternoon nap wasn't something to explain, but something to bless? What if your favorite routine, the one that seems boring to everyone else, was actually the very thing anchoring your spirit? You don't need to impress anyone here, not even me. Just be. That's the invitation. That's the whole offering of solitude. Not to shape you into something new, but to hold you steady while everything else keeps changing. You are not behind in your life. You are not missing out. You are in a quiet season, and that is just as sacred as any season of action. And yes, some days you will ache for touch, for conversation, for the warmth of another person's presence. That longing is real. Don't deny it, but don't forget, presence can take many forms. It can be found in music that remembers your name, in stories that speak directly to your spirit, in a lamp you turn on every night because it makes the dark feel gentler. Yes, even in this, even here, you are not waiting for life to return. Life is waiting for you to notice it again. And when you do, when you let your breath deepen, when you feel the light on your face, when you speak kindly to yourself, you will find that something opens, not loudly, not suddenly, but certainly, like a window cracked just enough for spring air to slip in. And that air carries something you haven't felt in a while. Hope, not the loud kind, not the kind that demands, the kind that whispers, "I'm still here, so are you." There's something profoundly beautiful about getting older, not in the ways we're told to fear or resist, not in the wrinkle creams or the silver hair or the change in our gait. No, the beauty I'm speaking of is quieter, almost secret. It's in how you begin to see time not as something to chase, but as something to sit with. You no longer ask life to be extraordinary every day. You ask it to be honest, to be peaceful, to be kind. And in return, it gives you things it never gave you before. A patience with yourself, a reverence for the ordinary, and a deepening, so slow and subtle that you hardly notice it. Until one day, you do. You sit with your morning tea, and you're not thinking about what needs to be done. You're just there, present, grateful, still. And that stillness, once uncomfortable, now feels like home. It takes time to arrive here, maybe even a lifetime. But the gift is this: you begin to need less. You begin to expect less. And somehow, in that surrender, you feel more alive than ever. The light on the wall becomes a painting. The silence becomes music. Your own breath becomes prayer. There is no pressure to make every moment meaningful, because the meaning has already arrived. It's in your attention, in your care, in your willingness to let this moment be enough. So many years you spent rushing, achieving, performing, providing. Now, you return to yourself. You are not empty because you're alone. You are spacious. You are not forgotten because the phone is quiet. You are private. You are not less worthy because no one needs you today. You are still sacred. And maybe, if we're lucky, we begin to live less like people trying to prove ourselves, and more like people remembering who we've been all along. Can you feel that? Not the rush of something new, but the warmth of something ancient, returning, like a kindness you used to know, like a softness you thought you lost, like the child you were before you had to carry the weight of everyone else. Solitude brings you back to that. Not to be childish again, but to be true again. To walk through your own home, not as a stranger, but as someone finally welcome. To sit down in your favorite chair and not feel lonely, but rooted. To speak aloud to no one in particular and feel heard by the walls, by the light, by the self you abandoned, but never truly lost. This is what it means to be alone and free. And it doesn't need to be perfect or constant or easy. It just needs to be yours. And if today was the kind of day where you didn't speak to anyone, where no one called, no one knocked, no one needed you, that doesn't mean you were invisible. It means life gave you a small, silent gift. Time to return to your inner room. Time to sort through your thoughts without interruption. Time to feel your breath, your body, your being, without performing. Not everyone gets that. Many live surrounded, yet feel unseen. But you have the rare opportunity to meet yourself again, to walk through the garden of your own memory, slowly, to sit with the younger version of you, the one who once rushed, once worried, once gave too much away, and say, "It's okay now, you can rest, I'm here." That's the quiet revolution of solitude. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it simply waits. Waits for you to arrive without needing to fix, achieve, or impress. Waits for you to sit down and say, this moment is enough. And if it isn't yet, that's okay too. You're learning how to soften, how to stay, How to let life speak to you without noise. That's a slow art, but it's real, and it's yours. So tonight, maybe you turn on that warm lamp, the one that glows just enough, the one that makes the room feel like it's holding you. You sit in your chair. The house is still. The world is outside. And you, finally, fully, are inside. Inside your breath, inside your life, inside yourself. You're not waiting for someone to knock. You're not hoping to be rescued. You are simply here. And that is not nothing. That is everything. If this time together meant something to you, if it helped you feel less alone, even just for a few moments, I invite you to come back again. This space will always be here, quiet, warm, patient, like an old friend who doesn't speak unless you want them to, but never turns away. And if you'd like to keep walking together in this way, feel free to subscribe. I won't flood your screen. I'll just be here, every so often, with another voice for your quieter hours. And if you know someone, maybe a sibling, a neighbor, a friend, who sits in a similar stillness, consider sharing this with them. Sometimes the kindest thing we can offer isn't advice, it's presence. Thank you for allowing me to be present with you. Now, turn down the lights, let the silence rise, and let yourself feel what you've earned. Peace. After everything, peace. You are not alone. You are simply home.